It's an honor to be here, and I'm thrilled to see all the work that we did in the study making its way through the state. I wonder if we can kill these overhead lights, might make it easier to see. You also have an amazing panel, and I just totally want to congratulate the Pasadena League for pulling together this panel. And I want to give a shout out to your Higher Ed Committee Chair, Nina Asher, who's here. So I want to introduce the panel members, but then I'm going to give a little background on the study and sort of background information to sort of lay the foundation for the discussion. How many people here have actually read the study or looked at the study? Can you raise your hands? Talking in the wrong mic. Okay, great. So then it'll be important to have some of the background information. And maybe you'll be so intrigued you will then want to go read the study. Okay. And you can put your hands to your ears if you can't hear me at any point, and hopefully I'll take that cue. So the panel that we're going to have, we have a Vice Chancellor, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Government and Community Relations at UCLA, Keith Parker. This is a great coup for us to have because his responsibilities are managing and interfacing with elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels of government. And if you've seen a newspaper at any time in the last couple of years, you know they are all trying to put their fingers on higher ed, and in California, the UCs have been particularly under a lot of scrutiny. So it'll be great to hear from you. The UC system has current enrollment of about 7% of California's higher education students. 192,727 students, according to the latest document I've seen, are enrolled in the UC system, and that's about, like I said, 7%. From the Cal State, we have the president of Cal State University, Los Angeles. Let me get rid of this. William Covino. President Covino was himself a first-generation college student. He has written 5 books. And some of them are in persuasion, so I'm very interested. I don't want to put any pressure on you. And he's very engaged in civic engagement, which I'm sure is part of why he's here with us today. And he's been working in community service. The CSU system is currently serving 14% of California's higher ed students, with a head count of about 404,000 students enrolled in CSU, California. And representing the community college system, we have your relatively new president at Pasadena City College, Dr. Rajin Verdian. Did I say it right? Before coming to Pasadena City College, he was at Fullerton College. He also worked for the United Nations in China, which I found to be pretty interesting. The community college system enrolls. The community college system is a little trickier to look at the enrollment, but it's about 74% of California's higher ed students. Most of the community college students are part-time, so the head count is about 2,100,000. But if you look at full-time equivalent students, that brings it down to about 1.1 million. So it's a big system. And after I provide some of this background stuff, it will be great to hear. So basically, we want to hear from each of them about what they're doing at their colleges, but also from the system's perspective, from their segment of the system's perspective. So we want to understand how the segments are doing, but also how are they working together as a system, and how is the system doing? And with that, let's see, where's the slide? Is Donovan here still? Oh, there you are? Great, thank you. So the State League decided to do a study on higher ed, and it came out of the convention. It wasn't planned, which means, among other things, that it wasn't budgeted. But because there was so much crisis in the state, as the state revenues dropped during the recession, the community college system turned away 600,000 students. There was a feeling that there needed to be a study on access. And so the scope of the study is to look at access to quality public education in California. Can you hit the... but when we were looking at access, we wanted to look more broadly. And so the study scope actually is access to quality public higher ed in California, including funding, affordability, preparation, equity, and opportunities and barriers to student success. I'm not sure what happened to the word success there. No, sorry, go back, please. And these, I want to speak a moment about the equity piece here, because we set up equity sort of as a separate little section. When you look at the study, it's in sections. But as we went through the materials and considered access and funding and affordability and whether or not students are prepared to be successful and all the other things impacting our students and access, it became clear that equity is not a separate or a standalone issue. Equity is something that impacts all of these areas. And so the study really looks at all of these things through the lens of equity and uses that as a measure, really, to consider as you're thinking about our system of higher ed, how are we doing? So I want to clarify, or at least make sure we all are talking about the same definition. So the next slide, please. What do we mean by equity? This is a nice little graphic. So if you click it one more time, the slide on the picture on the left is looking at equality. So if our goal is access, let's think of those little apples as access to public higher education, and we want everyone to have access, an equal approach would be what you see on the left. We provide the same thing to everyone. So whether if you're low income or rich, you get the same financial resources. If you have whatever your circumstances might be, it would be the same. And you can see there that equality in terms of services doesn't equal equality in terms of outcomes. So the slide on the part of the picture on the right is illustrating what we were talking about when we talk about equity, where we want, if the goal is access to higher education for everyone, and that'll be part of the discussion. Maybe the league doesn't think that's the goal. But if that's the goal, everyone may not need this very same services or programs or opportunities to achieve that equity. And so, we have many, many different populations that we are serving now in higher ed. We have veterans, we have students with special needs. I doubt there is a person in this room that doesn't know of someone in their circle of family or friends that is somewhere on the autism spectrum, for example. We hear about the income gaps. We have low-income people. We have very, very wealthy people. We have language differences. We have foster youth. We have many different ways to cut the population. And the question of equity is, how are each of those populations doing and why? And is that because of what they're doing, or is that because of what we're doing as a system? Okay, so next, please. So when we talk about questions about access, you could click it one more time. I really liked your flyer where you had the questions on it, so I got overly inspired. The study is really asking access to what? What do you mean by access? Do you just mean access to a seat? Do you mean access to being successful in a program? Do you mean access to a community college where you can get a certificate but not a baccalaureate degree? Do you mean access to graduate education, to career tech? Do we mean access for people who want to pursue lifelong learning? Or are we only interested in access for people who are going to be expanding their workforce, or their contribution to the workforce? And if you click again, please. And for whom? Who's the access for? And then one more click. And these questions really go to the heart of what's the purpose of higher education. And I hope that all three of our speakers will answer these questions from the perspective of their institutions and from the entire system. Is it working? Who are we providing access to, for what, and why? One more click. So if we're talking about access, you've got to start talking about the master plan for higher education, because that really is the blueprint for access. It was adopted in 1960, and it it assigns distinct missions and eligibility requirements for the three segments of higher ed that we have. The UCs take the top 12.5% of eligible high school graduates, and that's written into the legislation. CSUs, the top 33%. And these two are also eligible high school grads, so they get to say who we think is eligible, what's that grade point average, what courses have they need to take. And community colleges, 113, can accept any high school graduate or person, you don't have to be a graduate, who can benefit from instruction. And the plan, the intent in the plan was that people who came in through the open access of the community colleges would then have the possibility of transferring to one of our four-year institutions. The master plan says that all of these programs should be free, tuition free, and they started off very close to tuition free, and the community college is still pretty close to tuition free for most students. And it also envisioned an oversight committee or body that would look at the system and make recommendations to the legislature and the government and track how we were doing. We do not have either of those two last things anymore, but we are still locked into these percentages. Next slide, please. If we look at the master plan from then and now, and I think this table is really important. So at the bottom, 1959, the enrollment between community colleges and higher ed's about 50, and UC and CSU, the four-year granting degrees, is about 50-50. And you can see we have much less enrollment. So this table, I think, is showing two really important things. One is the number of people enrolled in higher education since the master plan was adopted is exponentially greater. Just, vast increase in who is attending and who needs to be attending. And the other piece is that the enrollment in our four-year and graduate degree institutions has remained relatively flat, while the bulk of the enrollment has gone, and when I say bulk is an understatement, has gone into the community college system. So the state, part of what the master plan did, along with some beautiful, inspiring rhetoric, it was a cost-containing measure, and it immediately redirected about 50,000 students into community colleges who would have otherwise been in CSU and UC. It lowered the ratio of the percentage for them to accept. And the other part about that I should say is that part of the plan is UC and CSU are supposed to leave space for transfer students for the upper 2 years. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to try and finish. So this is what the enrollment looks like now. If you look at the cone on the left, that's everyone in California higher ed. This is full-time equivalent students. So remember I said there's that difference of like 1 million community college full-time equivalent. It's actually 2 million bodies. And you can see for CSU and for UC that the transfer piece is working. For CSU, or somewhat, 52% of those 403,000 students are transfer students. That's what the blue is indicating. And for UC, about 31% of their students are transfer students. And these transfer students do as well or better once they get there in graduating. Next, please. So the economy has changed since 1960, and that is part of why you're seeing that giant increase in who's going to college. California is projected to have a deficit of 2.5 million college-educated workers by 2025. When this first came out, 2025 seemed like a long way off, where in 2016 it's not that far away. 1 million of those workers will need baccalaureate degrees, and another 1.5 million will need some college, that's to say a certificate or an associate's degree. The economy has changed, and one of the things I just want to mention, because I don't have a slide on it, part of that change has been driven by technology, which has been transformative for many industries, not always in a good way, largely disruptive, and has really not impacted higher ed as much, or education as much as it has the taxi business, for instance, or the music industry, or the newspapers. So I hope that our speakers will, may want to comment on that. Next slide. This is to show you, this is a growth. These are people who got jobs after the recession. So this is showing you the importance of these degrees for getting a job, for employment. So the top line is baccalaureate degrees, and the middle line is some college, and the bottom line, which is going down and not very good prospects for employment, is for people with high school or less. High school or less, you have very, very little to no opportunity to have a living wage in the economy today. That was not true in 1960. We had a robust manufacturing industries, and that's gone. And that's why I want to bring the technology, because those jobs and those industries have changed. They are not what they were. And the next slide, this is this slide I just saw this weekend, actually, and it's showing in earnings. So the darker blue is after-tax earnings, and each column is, again, moving along the educational degree attainment. And the light blue slide is taxes paid. And I think this slide is interesting to this discussion because one of the questions is higher education a personal good or a public good? When we talk about or think about who should be paying for higher education, say, well, you're going to earn a lot more money, therefore you should pay for it. But you're also going to pay more in taxes, and that is part of the whole system. So this issue of if we are not moving our population into this degree attainment, completion, that's not good for them. It's also not good for the tax base that we are all dependent on. Next, I'm trying to speed this up. This is just to show changing demographics. The chart, the map on the left is of people age 65 and older, and the dark color represents more than 50% of the people in that county are people of color. So for people 65 and older, the population is not predominantly not majority people of color. The slide on the right, 0 to 4, most of the state, 0 to 4 are people of color. And again, when the master plan was put in place in 1960, 90% of California's population was white. So there's a big change in the demographics. Next, one more click. The Latino population in particular is the rising demographic. One more click. There are 1 out of every 2 youth under 18 in California is Latino. So as we're looking forward to the next generation attaining degrees and completing so they can earn a decent living and they can pay taxes so we can still have police and fire and roads and education, 1 out of every 2 of these students under 18. And one more click, 94% of these students are native born. So these are not immigrant students, these are students born here, and that is the coming population. I think I'm almost done, and this chart keeps me up at night, and it's why I'm working on these studies, and why I got up and drove across through all that traffic this morning. When we're talking about equity, or thinking about the purpose of higher ed, this is looking at bachelor degree attainment, and this is national, not California data, by family income, right? Think of those little equity boxes, family income. The top line are students whose family are in the top quartile of students who've already started college. So these aren't the students who didn't go to college. This is a chart looking at students who entered higher ed. 99% of those students from the top family quartile will get a bachelor's degree. And you can see this over time. This is starting, I'm not sure when. Look at that bottom line, the purple line. That's families, students from families in the lowest quartile. Only 21% of those students, they've entered higher ed, only 21% of those students are going to get a bachelor's degree. And this is, 2015, this is existing data, we're not projecting here. What does that mean? That's like an 80 percentage point gap in baccalaureate degree attainment that we can see based on related to family income. And remember, our population in this state now is most of our young people are Latino. They're coming from families of lower income, many first-generation students. So, and then remember that tax base too and earnings. So that's some of what I wanted to look at, I think. Can I go one more slide and see if I'm done? So when I look at that slide, I think you have to ask these questions. Is our higher ed system a ladder for economic and social mobility? Or does our higher ed system reinforce economic and class divides? Next. So with that, I want to now ask our panelists to come on up. That's a little something to digest and to speak to. And also, please feel free to comment on some of the other sections. And I'm sorry if that, I do this every time. I like bring my stopwatch, and then I forgot to turn it on. So, I'll see how long no, I think, yeah, I will, okay. So who wants to start, yeah, Donovan, you can leave that, Donovan, you could leave that slide up, we might, yeah. So, who wants to start? Access to what? For whom? What's the purpose of higher ed? Vice Chancellor, do you want to start? You have I know because you're in government relations that you have actually had to spend a lot of time thinking about this and defending it.
Okay. Not only spend a lot of time thinking about it, but again, as you say, it's one of the things that does keep me awake when I have to go to Sacramento. Let me first thank you for this opportunity to be a part of a discussion on public higher education. These are the discussions that we need to have and that we have not had enough of over the years. And I think because we haven't had enough of these types of discussions over the years, we've gotten to the place that we are in. People have taken higher education for granted, and we cannot afford to do that. And so in terms of your three questions up there, I think those are critical questions. I think from my perspective, what I try to convey to legislators is not simply a UCLA message or a UC message, but a public higher education message, a message that says, at the end of the day, we produce two things. We produce talent, the workforce of today and tomorrow, and we produce innovation. Innovation creates new jobs today and tomorrow. That's what we do. That is our purpose. We do other things, but when you get down to what is primary and what is most important for California, it is production of talent and the production of innovation. The master plan that we're contexting this discussion in, that's where the gold in the Golden State came from. It was about access, it was about opportunity, and it was about changing lives in a way that your family income wasn't a determinant of your future. Your future was a determinant of your skills and the access you were provided, which is why the master plan provided access at all levels of our educational institutions for all of our citizens. And that's why I'm sure all of us have had relatives in other parts of the country that would call and say, can I send my son or daughter to live with you because they can go to school for free there? We remember that, right? And it was the attraction that not only brought people to California, but brought industries to California and created industries in California. And I guess in my lifetime, and in certainly all of your lifetimes, you can share this feeling, that gold isn't there. And it doesn't come back unless we pressure. So when we talk about writing letters, making calls, those are critical things that all of us need to do to keep this discussion alive. We brought it back to life last year when President Napolitano for the UC system kind of drew a line in the sand and challenged the governor and said, if you don't do this, then we will do that. And it was in terms of fee increases. And whether that strategy worked or not, it at least put the conversation back on the table.
When we talk about access to what, the question that needs to be asked is, what is the purpose of education itself? We have in the community college system, as you saw earlier, around 2 million students that come to us from the K-12 system. But for those students to receive that education, if we assume that the what is an education, there must be some kind of continuity, some kind of seamless transition from one system to the next. When the students come from the K-12, is there a gap that exists between the K-12 and the community colleges or the four-year colleges and universities? We can provide cheap education. We are in a state where tuition is very low. But yet when we look at the gap that exists between the K-12 and the four-year colleges, we need to answer that question, what it is that we can do to make that education that is so necessary for the success of our state, for the success of our economic and workforce development, what is it that we need to do to bridge the gap that exists? That gap existed between the two-year colleges and the four-year colleges. We've been trying to reach some kind of agreement on the articulation between the two-year curriculum and the four-year curriculum. That has been that gap, if you want, has been patched. It has been bridged with the associate degrees for transfer. And now we need to work in a manner as to make the access to that education possible and successful. We need to reach out and work out on making an articulation between the K-12 and the four-year systems, so that we do not have 70 to 75% of our students that need remedial education in English and math. Now, this it is very important that for access to education.
Start again.
Now, it is very important for access to higher education that will improve the lives of everybody, not only in California, but in the nation. It is important for us to bridge that gap that exists. We need to be able to make sure that we do not have 70 to 75% of our students coming to college needing remedial education. We can answer the question, access to education, but unless we can reach agreement on remediation, we will have a problem. And the second thing also is, although we say that education, access to education is more or less very cheap and very free in California, when you look at the cost of education in California, numbers that are on the websites of the UCs, the CSUs, and the community colleges, for the neediest of students, when talking at families of 4 with an income lower than $30,000, the cost of going to college for a community college student that falls in that group is close to $13,000. And for that same group, a student going to the CSUs will be about $11,000. And for that same group, if that student is going to the UC system, the cost drops to about $7,000. So, access to higher education, access to education for success is predicated upon many areas that we need to be able to address.
Okay, I guess this is the mic, huh? Yes. Yeah, all right. It's wonderful to be with you today, and to be able to talk about the access, challenges, etc. This is my third year as president of Cal State LA. And Pasadena City College is the #1 provider of transfer students to Cal State LA, so we have a very strong partnership and a great relationship, and I think a great record of student success. Access to what for the CSU and for Cal State LA? I mean, basically access to baccalaureate degrees, and you see we're going to be a million degrees short if we don't do something about it by the time we reach 2025. I mean, essentially, the CSU creates the middle class. I mean, they create the aspiring middle class. They create the leaders of tomorrow. And now with 460,000 students, we have a greater responsibility than ever to do so. So on the question of equity, it's very important, as was stressed, that students have access to an affordable education. Part of that is establishing, maintaining, and growing a successful transfer process from the community colleges. In the Cal States, roughly half of the students are first enter as freshmen. roughly half of the students enter as transfer students and take upper division courses. So there's a very substantial population of transfer students, and we want to make those transfers as smooth as possible because that creates a more equitable scenario for many of the students and also enhances their access and smooths the way for them. Relative to costs and relative to what's happened over the years, and since about 2006, the California State University system, the 23 campuses, lost about a third of their budget in reductions in state funding. That's $1 billion since about 2006. $1 billion. Right? Cal State LA, $30 million. Right? And that had to do with a number of factors, but one of the factors was a move away from the kind of golden priority of the master plan, which is to keep higher education affordable and accessible. We're building back from that, due in large part to Governor Brown's advocacy for the temporary tax increase that allowed us to stop the bleeding, right? And also greater support in our legislature by key people that reach right up to the governor for the higher education mission. So there is some recovery, but there's also a tremendous surge of new students, far beyond the students that we had in 2006. This year, the CSU system had the highest number of applications in its history. And Cal State LA, within that 23 campuses, had the highest increase in applications in the system and in its history. So there's a great demand for access. Affordability is key to it, and affordability happens through, I think, that second picture of everybody being able to reach the apples, right? We have to build some more boxes for certain students. So relative to cost, I mean, the sticker price in the CSU is around $6,000 a year in tuition. Right? That's gone up from about $3,000 in a little under $3,000 in 2006. So it's been a very significant increase, trying to counterbalance the loss of funding from the state. But when we consider that further, it's important to note that at universities like Cal State LA, and we're a microcosm of the system in many respects, at universities like Cal State LA, 50% of the students pay no tuition, zero. And that is because of a combination of Pell Grants from the federal government, Cal Grants from the state of California, and state university grants, which come out of our budget, so that for every $3 we collect in tuition, $1 goes back to aid. It's a significant commitment on our part to see that the average cost of students going to Cal State LA, and once again this is representative, is not $6,000, it's about $2,000. So we're trying, and we're trying to provide access to a greater degree, but providing that access depends upon stability and steady and predictable increases in state funding, because those are where the access dollars come from. We look forward to continuing a successful advocacy effort. I think we were very effective last year, our community college colleagues, the UC and the CSU, in sending the message to Sacramento. And we hope that this year is every bit as successful, and with the help of folks like you, it can be. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Can you click on I want to look at, I have that in a minute, please press it. So let's move to funding a little bit. Click again. One more. So this is looking at state funding with tuition, comparing us to the blue line. And when you're talking about predictable, stable funding, we don't have it. But I think it's important also to know in this, because it's very easy for all of us to say we should meet all the financial need that needs to be met. But the state has a lot of financial obligations now that it did not have in 1960. Health care would be a big one. I think there's $1 or $2 billion gap right now the governor's trying to fill. And also you saw we do have a great increase in numbers. One more slide and then I'm going to give it back to you all. This slide, I think, is important because it shows the impact of some of this legislation, and it makes the point that UC and CSU are not funded the same as community colleges are. So again, you're starting in 1965. The master plan's been in place a little bit. Then Prop 13 comes in. Prop 13, Okay. Prop 13 changes the funding, so the community colleges start going down now. We used to be able to do property tax, but UC and CSU staying flat, UC still climbing. Then Prop 98 comes in, and Prop 98 is the constitutional amendment that guarantees funding for K-14. The community colleges came out of the K-12 system for K-14. So you can see once Prop 98's in place, the funding is going up relative to the general fund. And UC and CSU are in a less strong negotiating position. They're with all the other parts of the state budget that don't have any constitutional protection. They need to ask and win the funding from the good graces of the legislators and the governor and the Department of Finance. So I wonder if you can speak to that, especially about this sort of different funding pictures and opportunities and challenges for meeting the significant needs. And I also would love to hear more about if you believe CSU and UC need to expand the number of seats and lower those percentages, or if community colleges should be able to offer baccalaureate degrees. Another way to.
Let me start on the the budget piece, because again, a large, incredibly large proportion of my work in Sacramento is about budget. This chart is really a good chart to illustrate the point of what ballot box budgeting has done. And so we have locked down, actually 85% of the budget is locked down, where by formula the legislature has no discretion. The 15%, and every year it varies a little bit, but roughly that 15% that is not in the formula, that is not by proposition or initiative, that's where CSU and UC sits. And so we sit there with prisons, we sit there with courts, we sit there with governmental operations. And sitting there means if there are budget reductions, that's where the legislature and the governor is going to make those budget reductions. And so my argument in Sacramento is that when you talk about the rainy day fund, UC and CSU has been the rainy day fund. Because as Dr. Covino stated, CSU was cut $1 billion, UC was cut over $1 billion. For us at UCLA, that was $200 million. We were all cut significantly during the recession because you couldn't cut in the same way other programs in the state. Now, again, I'm not going to tell anyone you need to cut prisons, you need to do those things, but we're in competition with prisons. Prisons, higher ed, okay? Fewer students, more criminals on the street. Where are the votes going to be? And so we have a tougher job of managing what the reductions meant to us in terms of still meeting our basic mission of maintaining quality and access for students. And so we did see those spikes in terms of fee increases. But another, again, unintended consequence that has long-term ramifications, and I'll use UCLA as the example. In an average year, we lose 100 faculty, either to retirement, to death, unfortunately, or people changing jobs. For most of the period since 2007, we may have replaced 20 to 25 of those 100. So each year, we are down in faculty. Last year was a good year because we got some, again, more restoration and state funding, and so we did 65 hires. We are still down in faculty, which means class sizes are larger, class offerings change. For us, research dollars coming in with fewer faculty, those change, and those are consequences that we live with the budget cuts. And so when you think about those charts, those are things and decisions that we as voters made. And we may have made them with the best of intentions, but let's understand what some of the unintended consequences have been.
Thank you. Well, the most regulated higher education system in California is the community college system. Everything that happens at the community college system level is controlled by the legislature. The funding is approved by the legislature. The tuition charged is approved by the legislature. Now it's $46, but if you look at that, about 80% of the students attending community colleges don't pay tuition. They qualify for tuition waiver, or what is known as the Board of Governors fee waiver. The 20% who pay tuition, that tuition doesn't stay with the colleges. That tuition goes back to the state, and then the state sends its funding to the colleges. So that's one thing that we need to look at. The community college system is supposed to take every single student that does not get into the UCs or the CSUs. The community college system is supposed to do everything for everybody in the state of California. And yet, when it comes to funding for full-time equivalent students, the community colleges receive the lowest funding for full-time equivalent student, around $4,800 per full-time equivalent student, compared to the CSUs, UCs, which receive significantly more money than we do. Right? In addition to that, the number of full-time faculty members that the community colleges need to have is also controlled by the state. At the end of every calendar year, around October or November, the state sends to each community college district, 72 districts in all, what is known as the faculty obligation number. This means that with the start of the fall semester of the following year, the district needs to have this number of full-time faculty members teaching. If you do not have that number, you are fined $72,000 for each full-time faculty member that you do not have. Okay? For Pasadena City College, for the start of fall semester 2016, we need to have 407 full-time faculty members. And if we don't have 407, we will be fined $72,000 for each one below that number. And it's not that we pay the fine, it's that the state will withhold that funding. It's taken directly at the top. Right? So we send our $46 for the 20% of the students who pay tuition to the state, and then we get our funding. Around 89% for this coming year, about 89% of our total operating budget goes straight to salaries and benefits. Okay, so we are left with practically 10% of our budget, right? To do everything else, that includes instructional supplies, that includes deferred maintenance, that includes, you name it, that it includes it, right? With the sunsetting of Prop 30 at the end of this year, we will see a decrease in our budget by about $1.8 million. The first year it will go on to about $3 million, and then it will go on to close to $5 million. Now, the college also has, not only the Pasadena City College, but the whole system has more expenses than that. We do have what is known as the state teachers retirement system, and we also have the public employers retirement system. Now, whether you're aware or not, the employee contribution has gone up, but is capped to about 11% by the year 2021. But the employer contribution goes all the way to about 20.5%. From 8-point-something% to 20.5% in the year 2020. Now, just think about that. Our funding per full-time equivalent student is about $4,700. STIR's contribution from the employer is almost doubling. PERS contribution by the employer is almost doubling, right? tuition remains the same, but doesn't really matter because that money goes back to the state. We are expected to take every student who does not get in the CSUs and the UCs and look at where we are with the funding. At some point, something will need to happen. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. There is one-time money coming in. We have what we call categorical funding for what we call the Student Success Initiative, the Student Equity Plan, basic skills money. Now we will be getting money for career technical education, but all these are not ongoing funding. They vary year by year, and you cannot make planning for the future of the institution for ongoing expenditures based on one-time money. So, as much as we want to say that the picture is looking good, that the governor's budget for this year is the second best budget for community college system, yet it is a budget that includes a huge percentage of income based on categorical funding or one-time money, not on ongoing income for the colleges. So we will need to be very careful in how we manage our money because of all the additional expenditures that the colleges have to face in the coming years. Thank you.
You have good news, right?
I don't know. I'm feeling pretty low right now. I do like the new brand for the California Community College system. We do everything for everybody. I think that's really pretty persuasive. One point I'd like to make is that is the value of an investment in higher education in California, which we really need to keep our eyes on. Keith mentioned our, being considered in the same breath with prison systems, which is something we've certainly wanted to emphasize since higher education is the antidote to that situation, right? So for every dollar that's invested in the CSU in particular, and we can generalize this roughly for public higher education in California, for every dollar, the state receives $6 back, okay? Nearly $6 back. Now, that's pretty good. If I could get that, boy, I'd take that deal, right? In terms of my own investments, put in $1, get $6. So when we look at legislative decisions, gubernatorial decisions about budgeting, we need to keep in mind where the good investments are, right? For the entire state's population, and public higher education is a very, very good investment because what it yields in terms of people with degrees, creating livelihoods, becoming substantial taxpayers in the state and well-informed and vocal citizens is a great benefit for us all. I also want to note the sort of overall change in the business model for public comprehensive universities like the CSU, right? When my predecessor, Jim Rosser was president of Cal State LA for 34 years, right? He's the longest serving public university president ever. So when Jim became president, tuition was nearly non-existent. Right? The state budget accounted for nearly all of the operating costs of Cal State LA and for the CSU. Right? So nearly 100%. This year, the state budget accounts for about 40%. So you can see that huge gap that that's taken place over the years. Part of it's been compensated for with tuition, right? But we still have a situation in which roughly 40% of the operating costs come from the state, roughly 40% of the operating costs come from tuition before the discounting that takes place, that $1 of every 3 that we give back in student aid. And roughly 20% comes from other. And other is the new reality, the new business model for a comprehensive public university. Other is philanthropic support, right? Other is self-support programs that appeal to professional populations who want to increase their qualifications, get greater certifications and things of that sort, and will pay at a higher rate than the in-state students will pay. That's what's happening, by the way. A little bit, a pause for advertisement. We just opened up Cal State LA's downtown campus last week. 8th and Grand, 801 South Grand. It's a beautiful facility. And that's going to be part of what's going to help us support our academic programs as we expand to greater professional populations. So other includes philanthropy. It includes work programs that appeal to professional populations, and it includes federal support in grants and contracts. So this shifts, really, the way that a public university thinks of itself, and in a number of good ways, because it actually encourages us to be even more interactive with our constituencies and our communities and create greater partnerships and be out there more, which I think has been great. But also has us operating in a way that is more fragile than it has been in the past, and less reliable. So when we think about that and we think about the great investment, $1 gets you 6, I think that it's just important to be mindful, not of a return to the golden age, because we're not going back. We're not going back, okay? My faculty ask me this all the time. Why don't you tell the governor? No. Have you ever tried to tell Governor Brown anything? I have, yeah. I'll go up to Governor Brown, I'll say, here's an idea, and he'll look at me, he'll say, yeah, that's interesting, how are you going to pay for it? He's been a great and active and engaged participant in the future of higher education, and I appreciate a lot of what's happened under this governor, but I tell the faculty that we're not going back. There is no return to the master plan. So what we need to do is stabilize as strong a relationship with state funding, as strong a relationship with partnerships in the community and partnerships with our supporters, and as equitable a tuition and fee structure as we possibly can in order to move forward, make sure those degrees get earned, and make sure that we create students who are giving back.
Okay. Do you want to add anything for UC on that?
Well, I'd add one thing. When I said we were cut as a system $1 billion, we're still in a hole. We're not out of that hole.
Oh, yeah.
CSU's not out of that hole. Community colleges aren't out of that hole. I think, though, what we're seeing is a lot more collaboration rather than competition between the three segments.
Right.
You know, there's an old quote, and I apologize for using it, but it fits. Lyndon Johnson once said, "Don't spit in the soup because we all got to eat." And when I think about the three segments of higher education, we all have to go to Sacramento. We all have to build relationships with legislators because we all are reliant on those state dollars. At UCLA, for example, it's 6% of our overall budget. But what's important is that it's 34% of our core budget. And so take out the medical center, take out athletics, take out our housing, take out parking, take out those auxiliary enterprises, and look at the core support that the state has always provided us. It's about 34%. And so we never use the term just. No, it's critical. It's not just 34%, it's a critical 34%. And you certainly do not want to see it reduced even more. And if you think of the other UC campuses, we're fortunate at UCLA in that we can raise money. And I'm sure all of you that are UCLA alums or have children, you've gotten a letter from us and a call from us. Because we're in a fundraising campaign. And it's not so much that it's the centennial campaign, it's a forever campaign. Because we certainly need private support. We need support from our federal research dollars. You know, and we need that state support. We have to keep those three balls in the air and keep them full to keep the institution going forward. The second part of your question, and I think it speaks to the collaboration. I think there's certainly a willingness to look at where we can provide baccalaureate degrees that California needs, and that I don't think those turf lines that probably existed in 1960 still exist today for a lack of collaboration across the three segments.
That's true.
But I would say this, when you think about the master plan was written for a state of 20 million people.
Yeah.
It's a state of 38 million people now. The planning that went on was planning because of tidal wave 1, which the baby boomers were in, and then tidal wave 2. The planning didn't take into account population growth based on immigration, based on birth rate. And so we have not, in order to meet those needs, we have not in our planning added additional UC, CSU, or community college campuses. We're still basically on a model for 24, 25 million people maybe, not on a model of 38 million.
In an economy where everyone needs post-secondary education. I want to give a quick shout out to one of my colleagues, Pasadena City College trustee Linda Waugh came in. Do we have time for one more question? Oh,
And another one.
Okay, great. And, yes,
Belinda
and
Brown.
Belinda Brown, I'm sorry, and Jeanette Mann, who was a Pasadena City College trustee for a long time. Excuse me. Anyone else? Any other elected officials?
Formerly, the Honorable Anthony Portantino, who chaired
Oh, great.
Assembly Higher Education.
Yes, thank you. Great. Okay. Do we have time for one more quick? I'd like to ask you guys just to hit on the preparation issue, and then we'll go to questions from the floor. And President Verdian spoke about this somewhat in terms of high school to college. And one of the things that we talk about in the study is a transparent, meaning transparent to students and families. How do we get where we're trying to go? And seamless transitions. And again, do you have, from a system, not just your segment, system-wide perspective, any great ideas of how we can quickly go from a system built for, would you say, 25 million to 38 million in, by 2025? Preparation. Well, you spoke, so preparation, about 80 to 90% of community college students come in needing additional preparation, getting placed into remedial education.
We are of the about 80, 70 to 75, maybe even 80% of students that don't place in college math. Some of them require up to 3 courses, 3 levels below college math. And English is no better. English is about the same thing too. And some require up to 2 or 3 levels. But as a system, several things are happening right now. Colleges are looking at accelerated English or math courses. Instead of having students take 2 or 3 semesters of pre-college math, they would take 1 accelerated math course over 1 semester, but very intense math class. And the same thing is happening in English. But in both English and math, it's not happening at a fast enough pace, because we still need to work with our faculty and work with the high school system to see what we can do. That part of the work is not happening at that same speed. We need to be able to reach some form of articulation between the K-12 and the community colleges, where community college faculty will be working closely with the K-12 faculty, especially in the probably junior, senior years, where we can articulate those courses. If they take this, this, and this, we can move them straight into college English or into college math. We're having some difficulty in that, and that's a system-wide issue that we're dealing with. And it's about the same thing that is happening in math. But we've been able to bridge that with the four-year colleges, the UCs and the CSUs. We have very strong articulation, where the classes that we take will get the students directly in the next level classes at the CSUs and the UCs. You all are aware of the 10 specific degrees where the UCs have created pathways for community college students. If you take those classes and you earn a grade, a GPA of 2.5 or so, and you follow that specific track, you will get into a UC. If you're accepted into the UC system, you can go straight in that specific degree without having to retake certain classes. We have the transfer degrees with the CSU system. Currently, there are about 27 degrees that have been approved by the Faculty Senate of the CSUs and the Faculty Senate of the Community College system. And we are working on more of those degrees. So, what the state is making all the community colleges look at is multiple assessment system, if you want, where students coming in will not be judged entirely or solely on the placement exams that we make them take in English, math, and reading, where we should be able to look at other criteria for placement. That's where we are right now, and it is not an easy process. It's very complicated and it's very difficult.
In the CSU, about 50% of the entering first-time, full-time freshmen need to qualify for college-level work in English and math. We as a system instituted a summer program. It was in 2009 or so, called the Early Start Program. The Early Start Program, which is funded by lottery dollars, actually, is a program that requires students who come with that status to get a start toward remediation. It does not, for most of them, complete it, because it's a 3-week, 1-unit course in English and or math that they're required to take in summer, or they can't enroll in classes in the fall. So the advantage of this is that for those students who are very close to clearing that hurdle, this summer program takes care of it for them, and they start regular classes in the fall. For those students that were not as close, they have some traction. They've gotten started. However, that said, it is the case that students who enter the university as first-time freshmen who need further developmental work in English and math have a significantly reduced chance of graduating within 6 years. Significantly. Thousands of students within 6 years. 6 years is the rate that we're looking at nationally now. It's changed. It's changed. Yeah, 6-year graduation rate is the general measure that we're looking at. I hear the buzz, but it was 4 years for me as well. But one thing to understand is that as access to public universities has increased, the qualified student population and those we want to we dearly want to continue to accept have more complex lives than we did. They come from backgrounds that are different. The demographics are different. Family responsibilities are different. The need to work and go to school has intensified. So when I was a student at UCLA, an undergraduate student at UCLA, I self-identified as a student. When someone asked me, what do you do? I would say, I'm a student. Our students do not say that anymore. They have multiple identities. Absolutely, that they're carrying through their education and multiple responsibilities, which absorb them nearly 24 hours a day. So the graduation rates have changed, but the dedication of the students has not changed. They are dedicated to getting through and getting that degree, and I meet them, we all meet them every day. That said, the remediation issue is crucial. It's crucial. So what do we need as a system? We need a funded, fully sufficient summer program to make sure that the students are ready in the fall. And that's, that funding is not there. And we need some more productive and substantially effective relationships with our high schools around the senior year. Yes. What happens in the senior year? Because our high school colleagues know by the junior year whether they have students that are not going to qualify in this way. So the senior year, in many cases, has some open space in it. So we're working very, very closely with LAUSD. And around the system, we're working with our school partners to see if we can intensify and work together on that senior year to make it a more substantial year for those who need that substance going forward. If there's anything that's reducing graduation rates for our students and making it apart from funding, it's the preparation issue. We need the students to be better prepared. They are qualified to do it. We know that if we give them the work, they can measure up. That's not the issue. The issue is getting it done early enough so that they feel as if they are integrated into the university upon entrance.
The only thing I would add to what Dr. Camino said, because we don't have, and you see the same significant remediation issues, but we do provide summer bridge programs for freshmen and transfers because we have a significant population this year. 41% of our applicants are first-generation students, about 40% are low-income students. And so the kinds of ongoing support, and it's academic tutorial support, but it's also social support. Because I think, as Dr. Covino describes, our students are more complex. I can think back to my time as a student. If I had a summer job, I could pay for my tuition and my housing off of a summer job. Well, a student can't do that today. And so it isn't just working in the summer and going to school full-time during the year. It's working in the summer, it's working during the year, and it's looking for every scholarship and grant dollar you can find. And so the cost issue does impact, and I think, again, adds that level of complexity for our students. Our 6-year graduation rate at UCLA, for example, is 91%. Our 4-year graduation rate is about 74%. And so, again, we are moving students through. We certainly would like to move them through faster, but again, I think, as Dr. Covino says, UC also has to deal with those students that have other responsibilities, that are getting to be older students in our transfer pool, who may have family responsibilities, and it makes it much more difficult for that student to put their total focus on their classroom instruction. I get a lot of requests for internships by students. And I say to them, your first obligation is to be here, be a student, and graduate. Second obligation is to become job ready. I'm not going to get you so job ready that you don't graduate. So I'm only going to let you work in my office for 10 hours a week. Well, I want to do this? No. I want to know how you're doing in class. And I think the adults in the room have to help our students remember what they're there for. Now, when I was a student, and probably Dr. Covino, you share this experience, I had fun. I was a little hellraiser, and I had a good time. They can't afford to do that now because their environment is much more competitive, their environment is much more serious, and they are privileged to have this opportunity, and they cannot blow it. And so that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on those kids. And I feel sorry for a lot of those kids because they don't have, I don't know that I describe it the best way, but they just don't have the opportunity to take a breath and enjoy themselves. College is the best time of your life. The best time of your life. And I worry on in terms of social development that we put an inordinate amount of pressure on our students for academic success, that I can't take a course that might be interesting because I need to take a course that's going to help me become job ready. I can remember Shakespearean plays that I read 45 years ago. I'm not a Shakespearean scholar, but I had the opportunity to take those kinds of classes, and it makes me a better person, I believe. And I worry sometimes that our young people don't get those opportunities.
Let me add a little bit more about the graduation rate of community colleges. You've heard about the 6-year graduation rate for 4-year schools. Community colleges also look at graduation rates based on a period of 6 years for a 2-year degree, right? And for the state of California, the graduation rate for the 2-year degree over a 6-year period is 35%. Nationwide, it is 27%. That's for a 2-year degree over a 6-year period. Well, at Pasadena City College, we are at 49.5% for the 6-year period. But what is more important is that when students come prepared, that is, they've met the requirements to get into English, college English and college math, they come in ready for college math and college English, that graduation rate is about 77%. But when they come unprepared, it drops. The graduation rate drops significantly to about 39%. But for those students who come unprepared in math, that drops to 23%. Just to give you an example of how math is so important when it comes to graduation rate in the community colleges, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing in the 4-year colleges at the CSUs and the UCs.
I have a huge stack of questions now, so I'm not sure how we're going to, which is great. I just want to add one thing to this conversation, which I think is really a critical piece, is this preparation. But in terms of these 4, it taking so long, part of that is an affordability issue, because the students are working because they cannot afford to attend. And we have students working 39 hours a week. And they're not taking full-time enrollment. So it's a 2-year program, a community college, if you take 15 units, if you take 30 units each semester. If you're only taking 1 or 2 classes, it's not going to be 2 years. So the funding in terms of affordability is a very big piece. And during the recession, students could not get classes they needed, but we are past that. Okay, we have a lot of questions, so I guess we should try to be briefer, and rather than sort them, I'm just going to go through them because they all look pretty good to me. So, how many eligible students do the UCs and CSUs turn away, if you know that? And President Covino slipped out at a good time for that.
No, the problem at UC is we turn away too many. We turn away too many that could be successful. That, the UCLA numbers for this fall of 16, we had the highest number of applications of any university in the country for freshman admissions, 93,000 applications. We're going to admit about 16,000 students, and our class size will be about 7,000. And so the fact that we're saying no to almost 8 out of 9 families, that doesn't make friends. That's very difficult. And the capacity that we have to grow is limited. So when we added, during the recession, when we added non-resident and international students, we didn't reduce our resident number, we just put those students on top. And so as an older campus, and again, we can't buy property in Bel Air, we can't buy property in Brentwood, we can't buy property in Beverly Hills to expand. As an older campus, the smallest land size campus, 419 acres, in the UC system with the largest daily population, we have about 43,000 students now. We're at capacity, and we will be adding an additional 750 in-state students this year based on our commitment to the state to increase the number of UC-wide by 5,000. It is very, very difficult to have to say no to so many families. Now, again, those students that are eligible, for UC are guaranteed admission somewhere. That somewhere may not be where they want to go, though. And so you have students that want to go to Berkeley, want to go to UCLA, maybe want to go to UC San Diego, and when they get a letter that says you're going to go to UC Merced or UC Riverside, that's not the letter that they want to get. We do a lot of post-admission surveys in terms of if we admitted you and you didn't choose to enroll, what was the reason and where did you enroll? Excuse me. And we don't find that those students aren't going to college because we didn't admit them to UCLA. We find that they are going to colleges, other places, in UC, in the CSUs, in the privates, and they're going to good places. They're going to get a good education. But I can't tell you with any kind of honesty that so many of the students that we ultimately have to say no to because of capacity issues couldn't do well at UCLA, couldn't do well at UC Berkeley. But we are in a competitive environment because of the small number of students we are able to take.
Dr. Covino, the question was How many eligible students did you see in CSU turn away?
Okay, well, the system last year turned away 30,000 students. It was a matter of having to, we don't want to admit a student that we don't have classes for, right? We have to know that we can make a good faith effort. At Cal State LA, let me just say, and this is true of other campuses as well, but since we're in the vicinity, we are making an effort to expand the student population and to increase access, and our growth has been significant. So we're at about 28,000 students now at Cal State LA, up about 7,000 students from 2 years ago when the new president arrived. We are taking a position, along with other CSUs, that we want to continue to offer access and figure out ways to do it. There is in the California State University system a phenomenon called impaction. Impaction. There's no other system that has this term or has this process. Impaction essentially means that a university in the system says our programs are full, and so we're going to have to consider admissions standards and admission numbers for the programs that are impacted. And some of the universities in the CSU are fully impacted. Northridge is, Long Beach is, San Diego State is, et cetera. So they're struggling to try and provide access. Others of us are determined to provide that sort of access and to put the classes in the schedule and to hire the faculty, et cetera. Now, I don't want to make this sound easy, but access is the highest priority, especially in the regions that I serve. So I, along with other university leaders, we're really striving hard in that direction. That said, there are limits, right? There are limits. And if we can continue to create the revenue for expanding access, we will continue to expand it, continue to produce degrees. But it's becoming more and more of a struggle. And at some of our universities in the system, it's simply become impossible to increase the enrollment in programs across the university.
There's a related question for you, Dr. Covino. Why are so many classes canceled requiring students to remain in school longer?
Why? I'm sorry. Say.
Why are so many classes canceled requiring students to remain in school longer? It's probably a question for you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Well, let me put it this way. I don't think that that's the case. All right. And if it is the case, please, whoever wrote the question, come up and tell me about it so I can go see that department chair. But a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we did find that coming out of a recession that a number of classes weren't being offered. Students were struggling. It was taking them longer to get to graduation. So my own position was, let's not do that anymore. Put the classes in the schedule that the students need to graduate. How are we going to pay for it? Put the classes in the schedule that students need to graduate, and then we'll have to sort of figure that out. So we're making an effort to have classes in the schedule. Now, if classes are either not at the optimum time for a particular student or have an enrollment so low that we can't afford to run them, then we may need to make changes and there may be some cancellations. But I will tell you that I, along with my colleague presidents in the CSU, get a weekly report on enrollment shifts and where the classes are needed. And our general inclination is to put the classes where the students need them to respond to demand and to make sure that they can progress toward graduation expeditiously. There are individual cases, individual situations that vary from that, and I always like to know about them in case they're generalizable and we need to pay some attention to them. But our efforts are on the side of not having that happen.
Okay, this card says there's no return to the master plan. So was the master plan a failure? And
I'll give you a short answer. No, it was not a failure. The problem we have now is the master plan has not been fully funded since the early part of the century, and that returning to fully funding the master plan and making modifications that are supposed to be made through legislative review and restoration of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission that's a monitor, I think those are factors that we need to look at. I don't think we need to scrap the master plan. I think we need to implement the master plan and modify it as needed. But the master plan has worked and still continues to work, but limps along. We're successful not because of the state, but in spite of the state sometimes. And it ought to be like it, again, I know we can't go back to the old days, but it has to be because there's a strong partnership with the state and a strong appreciation among all of us of the value that public higher education has provided.
I agree with everything that has been said, and all I would add to that is we need to fully implement it and also make the necessary tweakings as we go along.
The master plan was not designed to last forever. It was designed actually to last for about 15 years, at which point it was to be reconsidered. We have not had that discussion. We have not had that discussion at the level of the state. There has not been a reconvening of the great leadership of the sort that we had when the master plan was initiated. There's not been a reconvening of our state leadership and citizens to reconstitute the master plan for higher education. So many aspects of it work wonderfully well. Our three systems work well. Our missions, I think, are still where they should be, and our collaboration and our productivity working together as three systems is better than it's ever been. So the master plan in that respect it still works. The funding that it anticipated and the population it anticipated have shifted dramatically. So what we need to do is reconvene and rededicate ourselves to public higher education and ask ourselves what parts of the master plan need to be reconsidered and rewritten and reinstituted so that we can move forward with a kind of clarity.
I'm going to read these two cards because they're somewhat related. Given your emphasis on acquiring a BA or BS degree, what is the employment economic level of graduates in the past 5 years? Employment projections, which you all may not know, but there's the question. And this one says roughly 50% of college four-year grads who are 25 years old or less work in jobs not requiring a college degree. This is probably because of automation and changing income distribution. And please comment. So I don't know if anyone. Any thoughts?
Thoughts? When you sit next to the moderator,
right.
when you sit next to the moderator,
So I did show that slide that shows the hiring. Baccalaureate degrees are way up. I think that there is a big misunderstanding of what jobs require today, and that has to do with, keep going back. That's a good slide there. That's by a degree.
Yeah.
And the slide before it is also related to that. So every study is showing an enormous amount of difference based on that. Dr. Covino?
Yeah, just in the CSU certainly, students are starting jobs, getting careers at good salaries, largely, and there have been several studies of this over the last 2 years, largely in places where that are appropriate to their degrees. The question that we often get is, should we be focusing on vocational programs and getting rid of programs like getting rid of degrees in philosophy? Right? That's the one that always comes up, right? Right.
Exactly.
Why are they getting degrees in philosophy? Now, or art, right? Or I think President Obama mentioned anthropology at some speech in the past. Anyway, the interesting fact around that, relative to the CSU, the UC, and really this is throughout the country, is that people who graduate in the humanities, let's say, do not typically have immediate earnings that are at the same level as people who graduate in engineering, right, or business. However, by mid-career, the average earnings of folks in the humanities is, by many measures, higher. Higher. And we think we think that the reason for this, and this has not been fully studied yet, but we speculate that the reason for this is that the folks who graduate in the humanities and the arts, these are typically have learned how to be critical and flexible and nimble thinkers and innovators and creators. They are part of what has been called the creative class. And so they are adaptable to a number of situations, projects, opportunities in ways that some others may not be. And by mid-career, they're finding that comes to fruition. So I'm very happy to see those kinds of stats.
Well, for the community colleges, we have 4 parts to our mission. 2 of them, one relates to transferring the students to 4-year colleges and universities, and then there's also one mission which relates directly to career technical education and preparation for the workforce. And what we notice is that the majority of the students who go through the career technical education programs very often receive job offers before they even complete the program.
Right.
I mean, we take the case of welding. I mean, before they even complete welding, they are getting job offers. Nursing, before they complete the program, there are jobs waiting for them. That's where we are in the community college system. But as you know, we have four parts to our mission, and there are only 2 that really relate to jobs.
I am sorry that I'm going to have to leave. My older brother's having surgery at 12:30, and it's one of the few times he needs his little brother. So I apologize. I'm not trying to duck the questions. Dr. Covino, as a UCLA alum, can certainly represent both of us. But I have to go be little brother, so I apologize. Well, again, all I would say in closing is that thank you for this opportunity to engage around these issues, because we need public discussion and understanding of what happens in public higher education. We need your support. We need your voices. You know, at my department, we have our slogan for the year, raise your voice. Because if policymakers don't hear that higher education is important, then it's not important. You know, it isn't simply the squeaky wheel syndrome. It's that we have a vital reason to be raising these issues in the public discourse, the absence of which has caused us to think everything must be okay. Well, we're going to make it, but just not as good as we could make it, and you need us to make it. And so again, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to the League of Women Voters, to my brethren here. I apologize again for leaving, but thank you very much.
And part of, the motivation for this study is the League does have a position on community colleges, but it had no position on CSU or UC. And so once this process is finished, the League will be able to take positions and advocate and legislate on UC and CSU as well as community college. So make sure you come to the next session on that. This is a good follow-up, I think, to what you were just saying. There's been a lot of talk about money. What about the economically intangible social and cultural benefits of an educated populace?
The community will look better when you have an educated populace. The quality of life. People will enjoy leisure time. People live better. People live longer. I mean, you got plenty of studies that have been done showing that the more educated you are, the better. People live healthier lives. And we do focus on all those attributes and all those issues in our educational system. And I also personally believe that people who are better educated help make the world a better place.
We address issues like climate change. We address issues as global warming. We address issues that relate to almost everything because we are an educated population.
I agree. You can plug that. And as an example, we began for the third year in a row at the downtown campus this time, night before last, our program with Mayor Garcetti called the Civic University. And the Civic University program is a program for aspiring leaders to find their voices. That is, they have, the question is, how can I become a voice and help to make positive change in my municipality, in my community, etc. So we offer a program for them. The mayor and I are the judges at the end of the program. They all make arguments, and then we tell them whether we would have funded them or not. But they learn to find their voices and how to navigate government. Well, this is a special program. There's about 110 people this year in it, but it's really a fundamental part of general education. I mean, what you see when you look at any college or university curriculum is a great emphasis on a range of courses that we call general education, right? And general education doesn't have a vocational focus. It focuses on creating citizens with voices, okay? And the universities typically and universally see this as their primary product, helping to create. People create themselves, but helping to create people like you, right? Who continue to be active, participatory citizens and make a difference, a transformative difference as they move forward. And I'll give you one local example. We're moving at Cal State LA from the quarter system to the semester system, right? Yeah, this is our last year on quarters. So next year we start on semester. So we've rewritten the whole curriculum, over 4,000 courses, which has been interesting and good because they've been revitalized. But we've rewritten our general education program as well. And our general education program, given the mission and face of the university we're trying to create, our general education program now requires that every student take two courses that involve civic and service learning. This means out in the community, okay? They can't graduate without them. This means, by the way, so watch out for this, that next year there will be 6,000 Cal State LA students out in the community that weren't there before. So get ready. Any partnerships you have in mind, let me know. But this is part of what's integral to a university education, creating folks that look outward and graduate with that ethic of service, that ethic of giving back. There's really nothing better, and it's what a university education and a college education, I think, should be all about to a considerable degree.
So how do we pitch to get those?
Yeah. You can.
We haven't talked that much about curriculum. You have a little bit, and Dr. Verdian also mentioned acceleration and working with curriculum for 12th graders. This is a question about, does every potential college student require the same content for mathematical reasoning, i.e. algebra? Is there research proving that algebra success relates to student success in non-mathematics majors? I actually know quite a bit about this, but we'll see where you are.
Well, we do have mathematics for the liberal arts. We have mathematics for non-science majors. We have mathematics for non-math majors. Personally, I do not think that we need the mathematics at the level at which we make students take classes. I do not think that most people in a lifetime will use their mathematics to figure out whether a 5% discount at Macy's is worth more than a 3% discount at Target. I mean, that's about it. I don't think that differential equations, I don't think that, There must have been a reason at one point in time to put a lot of emphasis on that, but currently I don't think there is a need for it. So at the college, at the community college system level, we are working on figuring out what it is that we can do to get our students to graduate without the fear of not getting that math course that they would require to meet graduation requirements. And we are looking at how we're going to be working with the CSU system and the UC system to address this very sensitive, critical, and difficult issue for students.
I think the crucial question is a question of teaching, how math and related courses are taught. And we have entered an era of transformative change in this regard. We see it at the K through 12 level with Common Core, which is going to, as it evolves and is fully implemented, be problem-based and project-based. So a lot of the objection to math and allied sorts of courses has to do with the experience of taking the course and feeling as if it is detached from reality, right? Or from the practicalities of one's life or from the profession that one would like to go into in some cases. So Common Core will help that and will send us students that have had a different K through 12 experience that is more problem-based and project-based. But at the same time, what we're finding is most successful at the university relative to approaches to these kinds of courses is what we call the flipped classroom. So that when students walk into a classroom, they don't, let's take math, we could take languages, you could take history, any of these. They don't just sit down and listen to a talking head. Which really does not promote a great deal of learning. It is great for the professor's ego, you know, but isn't really attached to learning. They walk into the classroom and immediately are engaged in solving problems or putting forward projects, working collaboratively under the mentoring of the faculty to make something happen. The fundamental stuff is delivered to them online. Yeah, they can look at that at home, they can review it, they can look at it several times, they can ask questions about it. The classroom itself is lively, all right? So I think that as our pedagogy changes, that the results that our curricula will adapt themselves to that and will shift as well, and they are in rather dramatic ways. And our students will learn more, they will graduate sooner, they will pass more classes. We find tremendous increases in pass rates in math, in the sciences when we teach this way, right? And we'll see the applicability in a much clearer way than they do now.
One good mic. Okay. Can you talk about social support for first generation and lower income students? Social development's important for retention and graduation rates, the role of EOPS and other student services. And there's also a question about student equity success initiatives are currently supported by limited grants. How can they become institutionalized and supported for the long term?
Well, Pasadena City College is one of the leaders in that specific area. We have at the college what we call the Pathways program, which provides special mentoring and guidance to the students. We started with a small program, and now we are taking more than 2,500 students in that program. And the program has done so well that other colleges nationwide are coming to Pasadena City College to find out how we are doing that type of orientation. We have close to 20 different tracks to deal with various type of students. We have tracks that deal with students who are underprepared in specific areas, tracks for students who come from economically disadvantaged families, tracks for students who don't speak English. We have all kinds of tracks to work with the students. We bring them to campus over summer. We provide them with the orientation. We show them classrooms. We mentor them. And then during the year, we have meetings over and over and over with them. We have programs like the Puente program. That's a very small program that works with specific groups of students that receive special mentoring throughout the year, where they have counselors sitting in classes with them. You have peer advisors, peer tutors working with students. We have, with EOPS, of course, we have the same type of support that we provide students. And what we are finding out is we need to work with students as early as the middle school years. What we're doing now, we have our counselors and our outreach folks going to the schools and try to mentor the students and bring them on campus. Bringing students on campus and also bringing their parents on campus. We are doing a lot of that right now. We're bringing students, we're bringing their parents to campus because, and we don't bring them only once. We try to stay in touch with them. We try to bring them 2 or 3 times on campus every year. And what that does, it makes them feel that they are connected to an institution of higher learning. It doesn't matter whether they come to Pasadena City College later on or not. But as long as they get the understanding that when you go to college, you're going to have a better life, it makes a difference. I mean, we have through our Latino Advisory Council, we have a program called Adelante. The Adelante program brings more than 1,800 students on campus. And they spend the whole day with college faculty and staff, understanding what it takes to go to college. The biggest obstacle we find is that the majority of the students who come feel that they can never go to college because they do not have the means to pay for college. And we try to get them to understand that that should never be an issue. We provide help with financial aid counseling. As we've said earlier on, about 80% of students do not pay tuition at all. And the majority of the students also qualify to receive additional money for books and other types of services. We feel strongly that providing the right type of support and mentoring and tutoring and guidance will get our students to graduate. And we may even get them to graduate in less than 6 years. We are now, in addition to all that, we're also outreaching to the schools administration, to high school and middle school administration and counseling, so that community colleges are one of the options that are made available to students.
A couple of system-based, I think, initiatives that speak to this. One is that the CSU system, just this last year under Chancellor White's leadership, changed its allocation formula for the 23 campuses in the CSU. The prior formula was, in some of its aspects, completely inscrutable, but in other of its aspects, based entirely on enrollment and enrollment growth, right? So it's sort of the big get bigger sort of thing. This year, a significant component of funding was based upon what we call student success initiatives. That is, here's your money, right? And we want evidence that you are putting into place advising, mentoring, tutoring, et cetera, that are going to address the full range of student populations that have a need for it and have some impact on them. So we have that obligation. That's where the accountability is. Now, fortunately, at my place, we were doing that anyway, so we were happy to get it and happy to reinforce what we were already about. So I think that the system as a whole has certainly repositioned itself to look at the kinds of services that we provide students and not just do some sort of formulaic allocation that hopes for the best. In that connection, this is, the Super Bowl is Sunday, right? So February is Super Sunday month for the CSU. We go to hundreds of African American churches all through the state, and we bring our admissions people, and we bring our services support people, and we talk to everyone about the importance of a college degree. This is also part of that commitment to provide the support network early on to families, to their churches, to their communities, to help them see that that kind of support is there. Relative to us locally, we have a project at Cal State LA initiated 2 years ago called Go East LA, and this stands for Great Outcomes Go East LA. Essentially, it's a cradle to career support network for all the citizens of East LA that feed into the colleges that they extend out to. My greatest pleasure, my most wonderful moment in this program was last spring when we gave 1,400 kindergarten students admission letters to Cal State LA. There they were dressed up, they had those clip-on ties on, and their parents were there, and we gave them each a letter that said, "You are admitted to Cal State LA. You have to get older, you have to get taller, and you're going to have to take some courses that are required, but we're here, a seat is reserved for you." And it was a great day, and we're doing this at all, at all grade levels, but we wanted to give the letter actually to the kindergartners, because they took it home, they framed it, they put it on the wall, put it on their refrigerators, so they know that that support is there and that it's going to continue and that we're going to stay in touch all along the way, bring them to the campus, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is great dedication and great energy around these sorts of initiatives.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions left, but we also want to finish at, okay, I'm getting the sign that I can still ask a couple more. We're aiming to finish at 11:30, so if you're getting restless, the end is near. So let me ask, I'm going to read these 4 cards and let you, sort of respond to what you want, and then I do want to make sure that you each have an opportunity to say, what we should be really sure not to throw out or lose, and, whatever closing remarks you have. So here's, and we did have a couple of questions that were more for UC, like how much do you make from the football program? So I'm not going to read those right now. How are online classes assisting students in graduating from college? Given the competition for admission, have you set certain priorities, like younger students over older students? Or if so, what are the criteria for choosing among qualified students? That we know the community colleges are taking everybody. What's the opinion of leadership about reinstating the Higher Ed Council or the Higher Ed Commission? That would be a coordinating body that monitors or provides research and guidance on how the 3 segments become one coherent system. And with the projected need for K-12 teachers, are there any incentives that the UCs or CSUs or the government are giving to ameliorate that problem? So that's a little, you can pick and choose on those, I think.
The community colleges, the CSUs, and the UCs are working very closely together right now. It was not like that before, but with very strong leadership at the head of all 3 systems, we have been able to bridge a lot of gaps and bring the systems together. And as a result of this, the students of California are faring much better. I did speak earlier on of agreements that exist currently amongst the 3 systems to make students move more easily amongst the system. The CSUs will tell you that community college students that transfer to the CSUs, and the same thing applies for the UCs, perform significantly better than students who start directly at the CSUs and the UCs. This is a testament to the high level of teaching and the individual attention that students receive in community colleges. Community colleges rarely have those huge, large lecture classrooms with 300 or 400 students in a room with one professor, and graduate student. The average class size in community colleges is about 30. When you look at the ratio, it's about each class is about 29 or 30 students in one class. Community colleges under California state law have the minimum qualifications for their instructors established by the legislature. It doesn't really matter whether you know that specific area or not. If you don't meet certain minimum qualifications as established by the state, you will not get the job. The community colleges still though have one little problem. It's that we still have I wouldn't say the word stigma, but to a certain extent, people still refer to community colleges as junior colleges. Even high schools, counselors, advisors would rarely, or maybe that is changing a little bit now, but will push four-year colleges, private colleges, CSUs, UCs, before their students, to the high school students before they mention community colleges. Even though the data exists to show that the majority of high school students will go to community colleges. You saw the data earlier on, about 74% of students in California are in community colleges. The other problem that community colleges face is that when students leave community colleges and they transfer to the UCs and CSUs and graduate from the UCs and the CSUs, they have a tendency of forgetting that it was the community colleges that helped them to transfer to the UCs and the CSUs. They will mention as their alma mater, UCLA, CSULA, USC. It's much, much later that they will think of, you know what, I was a Pasadena City College grad. That's when I got my start, right? But it happens much later, right? But our goal is to have, to a certain extent, a change on how people view community colleges. And I want to thank President Obama and for Vice President Biden's wife, Dr. Jill Biden, for what they have done to boost the image of community colleges over the past 6-7 years or so. Community colleges have never been in that type of limelight, in that type of forefront, until the past 7-8 years or so. Everybody is talking about community colleges. There is even at the cabinet level, the federal government, there is an undersecretary for community colleges. Community colleges are mentioned almost every time when it comes to the economic and workforce development of countries, of the nation. Because we have the ability to address many of the issues. But California is slightly different when it comes to community colleges. We have the most heavily regulated community college system in the nation. Whereas it is easier in other states to make the changes, to address issues as soon as they come up, and create the curriculum to address those jobs. In California, it takes a long time. It takes at least 18 months before we make a curriculum change, even to address workforce and economic development curriculum. And it takes much shorter than that in other parts of the nation. So as we look forward on how we're going to address all those issues, perhaps one thing that we need to consider is how can we make changes to curriculum much faster so that we can better serve the needs of our students and the population of the country. Thank you.
I should add that the graduation rates from the at Cal State LA anyway, and I think throughout the CSU, from our transfer students from community colleges, and ours are primarily from Pasadena City College, are about 20 percentage points higher than those from that we get on the 6-year level for our first-time full-time students. And this has a lot to do with the fundamentally strong preparation that they have, and the sense of the more focused sense of career paths, of interests, et cetera, that's been instilled in the community college. Admission standards was part of it. The admission standards in the CSU are fairly uniform. It's the top 33%, and that's measured in various ways. The variation in admissions comes relative to program impaction and program demand. That is, when a program is full up, right, then admission standards tend to be raised, or sometimes there's even a suspension of admissions to certain programs. So if we're going to remedy that, we have to just make sure that that we can generate the funding that will be able to continue to provide access to that sector of high school graduates. The Higher Ed Commission has been a lively topic of exchange since it disappeared several years ago. We had our Pat Brown Institute had a day-long meeting about a year ago on this issue, and some former members spoke and some others spoke. So it becomes a live topic. Governor Brown was not happy with certain aspects of it. Others were not happy with certain aspects of it. There were tendencies at times for the commission to become less of a coordinating commission and more of a managerial commission. So re-envisioning that sort of coordination would certainly be a good discussion to have. That said, I would reinforce what I said a while back, that the three segments are working together better than they ever have now, and coordinating with each other to serve the students better than they ever have, and I think really quite effectively. I mean, the chancellors of the systems every few days have major discussions with each other. The presidents of the colleges and universities are regularly working together along with faculty and leadership on very concrete initiatives that we share. So I'm there's no sense among us that anything's broken, right? In fact, we feel like it's getting better and better and better, and look forward to that coordination continuing. And, the football program at UCLA, well, what can I say? Mike Garrett is our new athletic director at Cal State LA. You remember Mike, right? He grew up in Boyle Heights. He was the athletic director at USC, Heisman Trophy winner, and Super Bowl champion. So stay tuned.
Those were, gotta keep standing here, hit my mark. Those were, is there anything further either of you want to add before we let everybody rush into their cars? Dr. Cavito, did you want to add anything?
No, I've said everything. I've said more than anyone would want to hear. So.
Well, I think it was wonderful.